1. Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pediatric Speech Sister Show, sponsored by the Pediatric Speech Sister Network. I am so excited to have our guest on here today, Hannah Simpson. She is a clinical fellow, and I'm so thankful because the reason why Hannah and I got acquainted is because I posted something on Instagram. As you all know, if you've been keeping track of what's been going on this network, we've been talking a bit about the intersection of politics and speech language pathologists, which is more or less a taboo topic. So Hannah reached out. She was super fired up, super passionate about it, and said that she even did this as her capstone in graduate school, correct?
hmm
Yes, in grad school. So, Hannah, I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, and then I will let you have the floor.
Okay.
Yes. So Hannah is a clinical fellow finishing up her fellowship in a dysphagia voice specialty clinic and skilled nursing facility. Her experience with participating in field related advocacy was during her undergraduate program. She signed up for Advocacy Day, which ignited her interest. In graduate school, her capstone project focused on training pre professionals, students, to participate in field advocacy so they could feel more comfortable participating in advocacy as professionals. Her field interests include dysphagia, voice, field related advocacy, and health education in Black and Brown communities. So, thank you so much for that excellent mission statement and for all of the work that you are already doing. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that bio about yourself?
Oh, well, that's pretty much it.
Amazing. Okay. Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about your why. What made you join the field?
Oh, well, that goes back to my own experience with a language barrier as a kid. I am from a multi-language household. My mother is Mexican and my dad is Black. And I grew up primarily in just English speaking classes in school, but my mom still spoke to me in Spanish. But there was a point where I just wasn't getting it. She was really my only input. It wasn't really being supported, other than my mom. And her family, for the most part, is in Mexico. So when I was about 8, my dad had this idea that I should go spend time with my family down in Mexico. He felt that it was important to get to know my family down there, but we didn't really expect that I would pick up on the language again. And after just a month of my first summer at 8 years old, I came back to the States and was able to communicate with my mom and understand what she was asking me and talking about. And it just blossomed from there. And I ended up um, volunteering for a recreational soccer league when I was in middle school and part of high school. And where I grew up, there was a large Hispanic and Latino population with a lot of Spanish speaking parents who wanted to sign their kids up for soccer. But it goes beyond that because once your kid is in soccer, you still have soccer practices to go to and meetings to attend and games to play on the weekends. And I ended up being one of the youngest coaches at the time. I coached little kids like 5 and 6 year olds, but I was also on the youth board that they started, and had a big role in actually being, not necessarily a translator, but an interpreter maybe for those community members who needed extra support on game days or wanted to be more involved in the league or understand what was going on for their kids. And I enjoyed that very much. Um, I enjoyed being able to help when people had language barriers. And then I started learning more about communication. And at that time, before middle school, I just knew that, oh, I have this ability to speak 2 languages, then people can use me. But I hadn't really put any thought into the fact that that was communication and how vast communication can look. It looks so many different ways as we've learned in this field, the different types of communication. And that's when I started getting into communication. I'm like, this is awesome. This is neat. Like, why are there so many forms of communication where you're talking about body language, you're talking about sign language, you're talking about AAC, you're talking about, I mean, like, literally, communication is so big. And so I just kind of started nerding out about it.
Yes, yes.
And I was looking into the field of linguistics, was the only thing that I knew of that had anything to do with communication. And I spent a lot of time going through any mail I got from colleges that were trying to recruit and looking for if they had linguistics programs. And I came across communication sciences and disorders from I got a packet from St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana. That's in where I ended up doing my undergrad degree and completing my undergrad degree. And that actually is what changed the trajectory of how I planned for college. I didn't know that communication sciences and disorders existed. I ended up Googling it and realized, wow, there's a field of people who help, and their communication is at the center of that, whatever it might look like. And
Mhm.
so I was like, that's neat. And I ended up applying to all the different colleges I applied to. I focused on communication sciences and disorders programs because I knew then in high school that that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to become a speech language pathologist. And so my why, I mean, I have my own experience with the barrier of not being able to communicate, and so I am it 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 will bring tears. It brings tears to my eyes when people have these barriers for whatever reason. I just cried with some patients a couple of weeks ago because literally back to back, I see patients for voice and I see patients for swallowing, and both of these patients have different barriers. But they started crying, and I started crying because
Mm,
I can understand how frustrating it is to have that barrier. And so until I'm no longer crying, I feel like I'm
yeah.
gonna be in this field because I am so moved by how beautiful communication is, how beautiful swallowing is, but also just the amazing patients I get to work with. So
That is really powerful, and I love the passion that you have behind it, just getting wet and teary-eyed,
yeah.
it's like, this is actually the indicator that I'm in the right space. So, congratulations for that, and we're so thankful that you're here.
Yeah.
Now, Hannah, I do wanna talk a little bit about your capstone project and your interest in this background of the intersection of speech pathology and politics. Can you tell us a little
Mhm.
bit about that?
Yeah, and I know in my bio it says that I started participating in advocacy and day in undergrad, but I will be very honest. What a lot of people don't know is that I actually went into undergrad as a double major in political, what is it, poli sci, political science, and communication sciences and disorders. So I was graduating high school. I graduated in 2016. So that was a really big election year. And I was taking AP government in preparation for college. Um, I was so energized by that class. I just loved learning about the government. But I think it also coincided with the climate at the time and just seeing, really learning about what was going on, not only learning about like what these different parts of the government mean, what they do, but also like seeing in real life at the time how they're working. Um, so I was like super ignited and went into undergrad with this declared double major of poli sci and communication sciences and disorders. Now, that didn't end up happening.
Mhm.
It seemed like every single time I wanted a poli sci class, it would not fit in my schedule with my communication sciences and disorders classes. And so I knew that I wanted to do communication science and disorders. That wasn't a question. And I ended up finding other things to fill my time. So I ended up doing a minor in neuroscience and then double majored in Spanish just because I was there. And still really enjoyed, what I learned. I learned quite a bit. However, I still got the opportunity to participate in some policy and learning about policy, and I didn't need to have a poli sci minor or a poli sci double major because it is, I won't say it's very simple, but you can still be involved. You can still get involved and learn a lot. So that came through advocacy days. And I'll be very honest, I know I'm very firecrackery now, but the reality is my first advocacy day, I was like hiding behind classmates. I was so nervous because I'm like, we're at the state capitol in Indiana and we're meeting with government legislators, officials. Like these are representatives and senators. I, and I was so like, I'm not ready, even though they prepared us all morning on, you know, it was this really neat opportunity because we showed up at the Capitol and we had breakfast. We learned about how ideas become a law. We watched the little "I Am a Bill" video,
Mhm.
and which is so cute. It's so old, but it's so cute.
Mhm.
Um, we learned about what the process of legislation is and how ideas become laws, and then we talked about what was on the table for the day, what was important for us, what did we need to know, and then we talked about the legislators who we needed to approach. We needed to find these legislators, whether they were kind of on the border of supporting something that was impactful for us in our field, or whether they had supported something that was field related. We wanted to thank them and let them know that we appreciated what their decisions. Um, so that's that advocacy day and how I got involved with advocacy day. And when I got to grad school, I had a supervisor who had also had some experience. And when we were deciding capstone projects, this was one of the projects that she had in mind. And I'm like, well, I already know what my project's going to be. And so
Yeah.
I took the opportunity because this was awesome. And we were hoping to make it to the Capitol in Oregon because that's where I did my grad school, to do something very similar to what I had experienced in undergrad. And there were some barriers that impacted us. They were working on the Capitol, and there was limited about who was in and out of the building, and so just we were just impacted in that way. But in terms of what came of it, I really enjoyed being able to talk with my classmates and also the students in the year below me about something that was so near and dear to my heart. And I had some students who were in the year below me come up to me and they were like, "What do you need us to do? We want to do it because we love you." And like I'm like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
okay, this is what you got to do." So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
yeah,
You are truly an inspiration. I'm really thinking about, especially, first of all, for people who've been practicing in this field forever and want to get into policy, but might not know, might think it's like too late. But I'm thinking about the clinical fellows and the speech language pathologist to be who might be listening to this and like, you know what? I have always had an interest in politics. I just wasn't exactly sure how to get there. So I think that advocacy day is an amazing route to take that leap. Do you have any advice or recommendations for aspiring speech pathologists, clinical fellows, people who are early in the career to get into politics?
absolutely. I would say just step into it. I know that politics and policy can be a very touchy subject. Um, I think that there are so many people on this planet. There's just no possibility that we all have the same experience, the same opinions. It's just impossible. However, talking to other people and listening to what they say, whether we agree with them or not, we learn something. And if you are too nervous to talk to somebody, which is totally fine because you want to feel more, ready to prepare or prepared to talk to somebody, well, there are other ways to follow or to kind of get involved. You know, I would say maybe 99% of the social media pages I follow that are SLP related they post some form of, you know, politics related content. You know, inform yourself in that way. Inform yourself, see what someone's posting, compare that to what someone else is posting, and really digest it. Really think critically about what they're saying. Um, and think about it in terms of, well, how does this impact the field? How does this impact my clients and the families that I serve? It's one thing to take away something and say like, "Oh, well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that," or "I do agree with that a lot." But how does this impact the field and the patients that we serve and their families that, we work with? That's something to think about. And if it's not social media that you're involved in, you could also learn a lot about politics and policy going to your state's uh, chamber websites. So if you go, like California has one, and Oregon, each state should have a page. Now, I will say this is something I found completing the capstone project. Not every state has a direct link to, like, oh, this is an advocacy page, how to get involved here in the state of Wyoming. I'm just saying that I don't know if they have an advocacy link. But I will say that when I was in Oregon, I looked up the Oregon um, page, and their advocacy link was actually really well put together. And I'm like Googling it now just to make sure.
Mhm.
Um, but they have, um, they break down literally how to they break down, how ideas become a law. Um, they give pointers about how to get involved with politics or policy making, and they even give outlines, like if you're going to give a testimonial for a piece of legislation that's being brought to the floor, and you want to provide a testimonial, they actually give an outline and talk about, like, this is what you can present, this is what you can talk about, this is how you can go around or about it. Um, so not all states are have a really well put together advocacy page. However, the I know that Oregon had a really good one that I was really, really taken back when I saw it, because I'm like, this is what we need, But if I had a dollar for every time I heard someone say, well, I just don't know how to get involved, or even looking at my capstone project, my partner and I were looking at what were those big points of that prevent people, and they are just like, I just really don't know where to get involved or what to do if I was to jump in. So those are ways to figure out a little bit about, um, learn a little bit more about the process, how to get involved, what that looks like, what's expected of you. Well, and I say that, but the reality is nothing is really expected of you. Whether you want to participate or not, that's your decision. I would encourage everyone to participate at least once to
Mm.
kind of get a feel for what is this. There are people who do advocate a lot. And then there are some people who may just want to dip their toes in it and see a little bit about what this feels like, to do some advocacy work in the field. And I think everyone should experience it, but everyone to each their own. So,
Yeah, and I definitely feel that, it's kind of like, do you? But I highly recommend doing this at least once. I know when I was in graduate school, uh, I had the privilege of doing Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C. And
neat.
so it was very neat. And I am not a policy person. My mother is all she's a poli sci major, she's an attorney, and that's kind of where I got my like fix for that. But I wouldn't say that I was really a policy type person. And so going to Advocacy Day on the Capitol, um, just like what you said, I was kind of nervous, like I was there, but I'm like, to be honest, I actually have to do my own research on
Mhm.
what we're even advocating for, what we're even lobbying for. And so it seems like you're giving really good tips on what we can do to even be informed. Because Hannah,
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, this is almost like more or less like your fabric, right? Like this is what you love to do. Policy is something that you had to choose between speech and policy, and you found an excellent way to mix the two together. But there are speech language pathologists who are just living life, going to work, doing speech therapy, going home, and then that's it. They'll watch their
Yeah.
CEUs, and no shade, because I am also part of the problem. I've also been
Well,
that
it's
speech
enough.
pathologist.
It could be
It's like,
enough.
look,
So,
the job itself is enough. Diving into the nitty gritty of like the policies and the politics and the lobbying, all of that. So, what would you say for the speech pathologist who is curious about it
yeah.
and who wants to get their feet wet without going all in? That just wants to know just enough so that way they're well informed and can hold these conversations like what we're having now.
Yeah. And I want to correct what I said earlier. So, the Oregon State Legislature page is if you want
Mhm.
to find some really good support on how to get involved. If you pulled up the Oregon State Legislature page, and then at the top of the page, they have a Get Involved tab. And if you hover over it, it talks about engage, it talks about finding your legislators, learn. So, I mean, this is neat because you're talking about who want to someone who wants to get involved but may not want to completely dedicate the rest of their life to
Right.
policy. Um, if you go to this learn page, it tells you about how ideas become law. It talks about the legislative body. It talks about the legislative process. It even gives a legislative glossary. Um, we know in this field there are a lot of big words
Yes.
that exist, and some people can absolutely be swayed because they feel overwhelmed with just the terminology of what is it that I'm looking at? What do you mean? What is this talking about? Um, and so those are really good ways to um, to get a little bit of information. If your state has a get involved tab, or if they have an advocacy tab, it might look like advocacy. um, there's also the opportunity for you to attend state state um, state meetings, like board meetings. So I was fortunate enough to be voted by my peers to be the student rep while I was at University of Oregon for the Oregon State Speech and Hearing Association. Um, and I represented University of Oregon, and we had other student reps from the other universities in the state. It was really awesome. And we got you learn a lot when you go to board meetings about different things that are happening in different regions of the state. Excuse me. You also learn about like the budget.
Mhm.
Each state has like a budget and how to raise money for this budget. What are we going to do for this budget? Or, this is how you can learn a little bit more about what's going on, state to state wise. And I think it's really awesome. I loved my time with the Oregon State Speech and Hearing Association. They were really welcoming, and as a student, I participated in being a member of their diversity, equity, inclusivity group that was actually fairly new. It started like they had this idea that came to mind and started forming in just 2020. And so we were, as student participants, we were asked to even help create, what are the guidelines for this committee? What is it that we're expecting to do with this committee? Um, and I mean, that was such an awesome opportunity, and seeing how other individuals in the field were just as excited and just as willing to dedicate their time even after work. I kind
Mhm.
of, there were some days as a grad student, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to go to this meeting. It's the
Mhm.
last thing I want to do. But to think about the people who were going to be at the meeting, you know, that was energizing. And so if you're interested, you want to know what your state is doing, that's a great opportunity. Especially, and even if you're busy, you can the I think states usually meet about once a month, or once every couple of months. Just go to a quarterly meeting, see what
Mm.
that's about. What are they talking about? What are the big agenda topics, and where's money going? Where's funding being allocated to? What are the different committees that are available? You might just find one or hear of one that sounds like, oh, I might like that. I might want to get involved with that. Or it sounds like they need help. Maybe I can volunteer a little bit of my time to just do a little side project. Um, those are ways to get involved. Yeah, that I
That's
can think of.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, that was great. That was great. If you wouldn't mind sending some of those links so I can add it to the show notes for people to
Yeah.
check out. Um, so Hannah, we are actually almost at our time. So I mean, I think that this is an amazing conversation for speech pathologists who might be like a little intimidated by this topic. So I really appreciate you coming on, showing grace, sharing your expertise. Is there anything, I always ask this question at the very end, any changes that you would like to see made in the field when it pertains to this or anything at all?
That's a good question. Well, I have to give a shout out to University of Oregon. And that was my grad school. I love them very much. And my experience there and the things that I learned, the work that they're doing there was really touching to me. There is just not enough diversity in the field. Okay. And this is a topic that comes up over and over again. I w- just cried when I got in to University of Oregon, um, because I just was like not convinced I was gonna make it. I didn't know. I didn't think I was gonna make it, but they are purposely looking for you know diverse students, and we talk a lot about diversity in terms of ethnicity and race. But I the diverse students that I worked with at University of Oregon, I mean, we're talking about neurodivergent, we're talking about queer individual representation there. It was important. And I
Mhm.
learned so much. And so if there's ever a topic that I'm going to bring up where I feel like needs to improve, it's always going to be diversity. And I think University of Oregon is like knocking the ball out the park, and that's one I can speak to. If other universities are, making way, I hope so,
Mhm.
because that is it is really important. When you think about who are we are working with, and who are we representing in this country? There needs to be more representation of the patients that we serve. I can never forget the look of a woman's face who came into the radiology unit when I was a graduate student working in a hospital, or had a hospital placement, and we were doing modifieds. We did modifieds once a week. We did 7 back to back. And this woman came into the radiology unit, and she was a black woman, and she was just like, "Oh, well, hello."
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I will never forget that. I will never forget that. I'll never forget my school placement and going to a school where this sweet young girl, black young girl, came up to me and literally said, "You look like me."
Yeah.
And so I know that we're here talking about policy and politics and talking about those tough conversations, but that's just as tough of a conversation. I know there are a lot of people out there who are doing really good work. So shout out to those people. I appreciate you. I see you because the work needs to be done. And we're just not getting as much diversity as we need in the time that we've been working at it. So
Mm, yeah, I agree. It's definitely a work in progress, and I think these past 4 years, we've broken a lot of ground. It might take another massive event for there to be, a crazy shift, like how we had the 2020 George Floyd and the
mhm.
pandemic, and we were forced to watch all of the inequities and witness it and feel it. So, who knows? Hopefully that doesn't have to happen, but we're taking steps in the right direction. So,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Well, Hannah, thank you so, so much. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about your capstone and the work that you're doing now in the field?
Of course. I have an Instagram page that you can follow, and I answer direct messages. It is SLP for Advocacy. So you can follow me there. Feel free. I love talking to people. I'm a big yapper.
Yeah.
So I can talk all day. So, yeah,
Amazing, amazing. Yes, we love the yappers. We love the yappers. Well, thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us in this conversation. Thank you, everyone who watched live and who's watching the replay.